Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we've got part 15 of our Toys and Joys dump truck and pup trailer build. Well, you might say that we're just trucking along with this build, and it's been a long haul. I have to tell you, I'm exhausted. But we still have a ton more stuff to cover, and I really want to pick up the pace even more. So let's not talk about it. Let's get over here to the bench and get some work done. Well, I have marked the position of the holes on this tailgate, and I'm going to tell you, do not rely on just the wood itself. You are drilling right in the middle of a glue joint. This drill bit is going to act like a chisel, like a wedge to drive those apart. So get yourself a hand screw clamp or something on there, even if it's just a piece of wood on either side with a quick grip or a spring clamp. Anything to give it extra support and extra strength. And we're just going to drill the 3/32 diameter hole 1/4 of an inch deep between the two layers. All right, and there is one done. We're going to put our clamp on the other side and repeat the procedure, and then we can head back over to the bench. Well, we can see on our drawing that those holes that we just drilled, this one here and the one on the other side, they require a 3/32 diameter dowel that is 1/2 inch long, but we're not going to drill those in just yet because we want to get our hinges in place, and those dowels will get in our way. So our hinges that we made actually stick off the back, just like this here. Can you see that? Right off the back. And what we're going to do is I've measured off the main drawing and scaled it from top to bottom, and it's 3 1/16 of an inch is what the measurement is that these are from the bottom. So we're just going to apply some glue. I have some setup blocks here at 3 1/16 of an inch, and we're going to use them as our guide and glue our hinges in place just like this on both sides of our tailgate. Now, before you do this, guys, just hold your hinges in place and test fit them on the back of your dump box. You would hate to get this all glued together and find out that it doesn't fit. So do a dry test fitting just to be sure. And while we're waiting for those hinges to dry, we can cut the 2 1/2 inch lengths of 3/32 diameter dowel that we need, just using the miter box and a little pull saw. Now guys, if you're not sure of where you can get 3/32 diameter hardwood dowel, Lee Valley sells this stuff, but they market it as 1/12 of an inch. So if you're wondering what 1/12 of an inch is, well, that is 3/32. All right, and now we can give those a light sanding and glue them into our tailgate. So we'll just put these couple of 1/8 dowels through just to test the fit before we go through the trouble of making axle pins to glue in place here. And yeah, that looks great. That fits really well. It looks nice and square at the back. It raises up, no problem. All right, and of course, you know, when the dump truck dumps, this swings forward like that to allow the load to come out and then closes afterwards. All right, so there we go. There is our dump truck tailgate. So make those axle pins, guys, and glue your tailgate in place. Now, if you remember quite some time ago, we made these rear dump pivot blocks, and I've just got them stuck onto a piece of 1/8 inch diameter dowel. And I'm just going to glue them onto the frame. At the moment, the frame is upside down on the bench. I'm going to use this piece of dowel to align them, and they will get glued flush with the back end of the frame and flush with the bottom of the frame. So we can get those glued in place and let them set up. And we can just check that to make sure that it tilts smoothly. And it does. Everything looks good. There's no binding. It aligns nicely when it drops back down onto the frame. The tailgate is opening and closing nicely. I still need to make those end caps there for that pin, but that's no big deal. We're coming along great. Coming along great. Well, when we were installing this dump box frame, I said there really wasn't any guidance, any way to get the spacing. I used a gauge along the side to get equal spacing on the sides of the box to get our 1.25 inches in between, which is the same dimension as the hole in the front of our dump box floor. And then I looked over here on sheet 7 of 9, and apparently I missed something, which is this dump box frame spacer and the rear dump box frame spacer. Well, guys, the one spacer is nothing more than a straight up block of 1/2 inch by 3/8 walnut. In this case, that is 1.25 inches long. But the rear has this one hole drilled in the middle, this 1/8 diameter hole, and that will coincide with the 2 holes that are drilled in our dump box frame. Now, my suggestion here, once you get the block itself cut, is to drill slower than you have ever humanly drilled before. Let the drill bit do its job. Go down maybe 1/16 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch. Back the bit out and let the chips clear. Blow them out of the way, and then go down a little more. This is an end grain drilling, which is tough as it is, but with a thin bit like this, deflection is a very real possibility. So once you get your hole drilled and you're happy with the fact that it is straight through your piece, we can sit it here, just dry fit it, and it will line up with the holes that we've already drilled in this section. And we're just going to put a 1/8 inch dowel. Now there is a curve that they show here. It's a slight curve at the bottom. My suggestion would be to, once you get this in place and you're happy with where it is, I would hold it in place and then just mark that curve. And I can kind of see here that this is hardly even worth shaping at this point. It is very, very tiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to glue the entire square block in here, and then I can use a sanding block across here afterwards to shape it to match the profile of our dump box frame perfectly. All right, there we go. We have our tailgate now glued in place. I've done our little tiny axle pins here, and I've also added just a little bit of a laser embellishment here with the do not push on the back, which is common in a lot of dump trucks that you see on the road. But now, guys, I want to start working on these box cylinders. We're going to start with the lower box cylinder, and the very first piece is this block at the bottom. Now this block is a simple piece, guys. It's 5/8 by 5/8 square. It's 1.25 inches long, and dead center here, I have drilled a 1/8 diameter hole. Again, I want to caution you on drilling end grain here with such a small bit. Deflection is your enemy, so take it slow. If you think you're drilling slow, go half the speed, and you're probably getting close to the speed you should be drilling. So other than this 1/8 through hole, in the top here, I have drilled a 1/2 inch diameter, 1/8 deep Forstner bit hole. And we can see that right here on the drawing. It shows it. Now, guys, from here, we need the actual cylinder. So I'm going to go through a process here of how to drill these cylinders. It is the same for every one. We have 3 here, the lower box, the mid box, and the upper box cylinder, and they all fit into each other. I am not going to go through this process for every one of them. So we're going to do it for the main one, the lower box cylinder. Now, what I have here is a 1/2 inch diameter dowel that is 4.25 inches long. Truth be told, I turned it on the lathe. You can still see the marks from my stem center and where my center was holding it in place. Now, guys, this is the advantage to turning your own. That center mark right there, that is the dead center of our dowel. So we need to drill a 5/16 diameter hole right through this thing from end to end. Guys, again, end grain drilling on maple, take it as slow as you possibly can. Do 1/4 inch at a time and clear the bit out. Just do it bit by bit by bit. These things are absolutely notorious for blowing out on the sides of them with the drill bit, and it's all due to deflection. So just go slow, even with that 5/16 diameter bit. It's a little confusing on the drawing here because if you scale this out, right here it shows these dotted lines with this hole in the middle. This hole is quite a bit bigger than the 5/16 that is listed on this section right here. So we're going to drill it at 5/16, which will coincide with the diameter of the mid-box cylinder. So let's take this over to the drill press and I'll show you the setup that I use. All right, so I have my pen drilling jig here and I'm holding the shop turn dowel. I have set my fence so that if I place this jig against the back of the fence, my bit will line up. It's actually a little off there, but my bit will line up with that center punched hole that was left by my stem center over at the lathe, because that is the exact center for our dowel. And we're going to line it up so that our brad point bit lines up perfectly in the center. And once we're happy with the alignment, we're going to drill it all the way through. So remember, drill slow and clear the chips frequently. Okay, so I think we're about just over halfway there. We're going to take this, flip it 180 degrees, put our dowel back in here, tighten it in place, and we're going to start from the other side. And I'm pretty sure we just broke through there. Let me just have a look. And yes, we have, I don't know if you can see that, but we have a nice through hole here. So that is our first cylinder, well, sort of done. We still need to make the top cap for it. Well, in order to make this top flange, I have a piece of 1/2 inch long maple here. I think it's just under 3/4 by 3/4. And I have drilled in the middle a 1/2 inch diameter hole that is 3/8 of an inch deep, just like it shows on the plans here. And guys, I have just a center, a collet center placed in here and tightened just to hold it in place. You don't want to tighten it too much because you'll actually split the grain here. And we're going to take this over to the lathe and using a collet chuck, this will get mounted in here and then tightened, and this end goes on the headstock of your lathe. And from there, I can gently turn this down to be its 5/8 of an inch diameter. And once you get that top flange turned, we can just release it here from the collet. And we'll take this one out of here as well. This is just a little Allen key bolt, and it just releases just like that. And you can see there we have our end flange. So we are going to glue this on the end of the dowel that we just drilled that 5/16 diameter hole in. And we can just let that dry. And once your cap is dry, you have all the setup already done and the proper size bit installed. You should just be able to line up your drilling jig here and drill through the top end of this cap. Okay, and now this lower box cylinder can now get glued in place, just like this, into our block. You just want to make sure that it's square in there and that it fits really well. Before you glue it in as well, you want to make sure that it's going to fit in between your frame, because this is where it's going to get mounted, right in here in our frame. So if you're happy with the fit, give this piece a sanding and we can glue our lower cylinder in. Now guys, the other pieces of the cylinder are the same. For the mid-box cylinder, it's identical. I'm not going to go through it again. And the upper box cylinder is just a piece of 3/16 of an inch dowel cut to the dimensions on the plans. So let's get these pieces made and I'll show you where to go from there. Okay, so you don't have one of these fancy jigs here, and that's fine because, truth be told, depending on the diameter of your stock, this doesn't work, because with the smaller one of the mid-box cylinder, you can place this in here and tighten it till the cows come home, and it's still loose in here because it doesn't tighten down on something as small as a 5/16 diameter dowel. So you can make your own drilling jig, guys. It's just a plain block of whatever species you want. It doesn't matter. It could be hardwood, softwood. It makes no difference. And you just want to make sure your sides are square. Somewhere along the length here, drill a hole the same diameter as the dowel that you want. And all you're going to do is, at the bandsaw, I cut a kerf here in the middle. The purpose of this kerf is to allow me to compress this board with a clamp. So what we're going to do is stick our 5/16 inch dowel in here. We will clamp this to our fence to drill our hole. And by doing that, clamping this to our fence, this kerf will compress, and it's going to hold our dowel in place and allow us to drill in that exact center. As long as we set up the stops and the fence in the same way that we did for this jig, we'll have no troubles with this, and we should just be able to drill halfway, as I showed you on this piece over here, and rotate it 180 degrees and drill through and meet in the middle. So there you go. If you don't have a drilling jig, don't fret. Don't think I can't do this project. You can easily make a drilling jig out of scrap. All right, and as long as you're careful, you should have your lower cylinder piece here looking like this. This is the mid-box cylinder, and that will slide right in here like that. And then we have our 3/16 diameter dowel, which slides right in here like this. And of course, as the bucket extends, these extend to give it its full height. But we still have this little circular connector piece here. It's made from 5/16 of an inch thick stock. So I have that here, and I've marked out this 5/8 of an inch diameter circle. I've marked the center of the circle and the center of our 5/16 board, and we're going to drill a 3/16 diameter hole right down until we come flush right here with the center of our circle. And we can see that right here on the print. It shows our dowel right up there at the center. So drill as much as you can while the stock is still square. We're going to drill this hole first. And once you have that hole drill, we can just test to make sure our dowel fits in, and we're good. And we are going to take this over to the scroll saw and carefully cut this circle out. Okay, and now with that done, don't sand off your crosshairs here that you used, or that I used, to draw this circle, because once we get this glued in place and it dries, we need to drill the center hole here 1/8 of an inch in diameter. That will be a through hole right in the middle. But first, let's get our lollipop glued together. Well, I've just placed these temporarily here down into our frame. They get mounted with a 1/8 dowel with the hole that we drilled in the frame way back in part 1. But this here doesn't attach to anything right now. We could put this cover over it, and it's really not going to do anything, because we need to make this top cylinder mount. And that is the next thing that we're going to do to tie this all together. So in order to make this top cylinder mount, you're going to need a piece of stock. And I've taken a piece, in this case, maple, and I've cut it to the final dimensions here, which is 1 1/4 long, 11/16 wide, and 3/4 of an inch tall. Guys, this is a very simple piece, but I've used maple for a reason, and that's because this piece here is going to hold the top of our cylinder on our truck for our dump bucket. So using the dimensions on the plan, I'm going to mark out this 1/8 inch diameter hole. I'm going to mark out this 3/8 wide slot here, and then I'll show you what we're going to do next with this. Okay, and you should have something that looks like this. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to drill this 1/8 diameter hole. Guys, once again, end grain drilling with a 1/8 bit. Go as slow as you can. clearing the chips as much as you can. You do not want deflection here. So make sure you drill that right through. Once you get that drilled, guys, we're just going to cut this slot out at the scroll saw. This is an interior piece. This actually gets embedded in here in our cylinder box top. So we don't even really need this to be pretty because it is going to be hidden inside of this whole unit here. So if you're a little off with your scroll saw cuts, then what difference does it make? So if you don't have a scroll saw though, guys, you can use a band saw, you can use a hand saw, you can use a chisel, whatever you like. But let's get this dado cut out of here and get our 1/8 diameter hole drilled. So with that piece cut now, we can glue it right here, flush with this front edge and right up to the top of our cylinder box. And then we'll clamp that in place and let it set up. Now mine isn't really fitting very well, and I can see what the problem is. The problem is we've got a little bit of squeeze out in here that's preventing my my block from sitting flush with the top of the cylinder blocks. So just check on that and make sure that it fits. This is where dry fits come into play, guys. You want to do the dry fits to make sure that your pieces, once you apply glue, are going to seat the way that you want them. And if they don't, now is the time to get that corrected. All right, so these parts are pretty much dry in here, this upper bracket. I've stripped down the model because I think it's time to throw caution to the wind and glue this stuff all together now. So we're going to glue in our wheels. Guys, my advice here, do not, I'm going to say this again, do not put any glue on your axle pin, because what's going to happen is when you push it in, it's going to scrape along the side of your hole and it's going to cause it to come in contact with your wheel. That's going to glue your wheel to your axle spacer. So my suggestion is to get a small piece of dowel and get glue inside the axle, and then you can just place your axle pin in place and shove it all the way in until it seats properly. It doesn't take much to glue those axle pins in place. Also, I will be putting some plastic washers between mine to give them a little bit of a better time spinning and not have it wood on wood. Also, we will glue in this 1/8 dowel that is holding our piston assembly here. We will glue that in place. As well, we will cut the 1/8 inch dowel, which goes at the back end of our bucket to length. We will glue that in. We're going to glue our bucket in place. We're going to glue our cover in place, as well as getting the piston in here with the 1/8 inch piece of dowel, which I have right here. So we'll lock this in and glue it in place, being sure to do a dry fit, guys, before we do. And once we're happy with all of this and we're content with it, we are going to glue our cab on the front end, and then everything at that point will be as far as we can take it. Well, I know that some of you are going to ask about these plastic washers that I spoke of, and all it is, guys, is I use these punches to punch out plastic from things like margarine tub lids or old plastic containers. And then when I get a bunch of these discs, when I make a model, all I have to do is get a smaller punch, try to go as close to the center as I can, just like this, give it a little crack. Didn't go all the way through there. There we go. And you end up with a plastic washer now with a 1/4 inch hole in the middle, and that will go in between your axles, your axle spacers and your wheels. It'll prevent any squeeze out from gluing your wheel in place, and as well give a nice surface for the wheel to spin on instead of the friction of the wood on the wood. So that's all it is for these plastic washers. And unfortunately, guys, that's all the time that we have for this week's show. It's amazing how quickly these shows go. And I'm telling you, it's a lot more time spent in the shop to be able to compress it to get these 20-25 minute shows under my belt. Now, there are some pieces in this section of the build that, you know what, might seem a little simple, and that's just fine. But they are still pieces that we need to cover in order to complete the entire model. And at the beginning, I said, as promised, that I would do my best to show each and every piece. And that's part of the problem that's making this series so long. But I'm sticking to my word and showing as many of the pieces, if not all of them, that are included on my prints. So either way, guys, I hope you're enjoying it up until now. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We have an amazing audience base here, and I'm hoping that you're going to consider becoming a part of that. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. I hope that you've enjoyed the content. I hope you found it interesting, and if not, maybe a little entertaining. I hope you've learned something along the way during today's show. I hope that you're going to get these plans and follow along at home with your own model build. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.